Welcome to the first session in a series of videos covering crisis after disaster, brought to you by the Central Impact Coalition. Central Impact is comprised of three different entities in partnership to bring communities and families educational material regarding financial literacy and STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. The partners in the coalition are Dollars and Good Sense Foundation, Seedling Financial Literacy, and Bridging the Gap. Our goal is to bring you the facts, have expert guest speakers with us, and present relevant information in an easy to consume format. The first video, entitled Navigating Financial Chaos During Unexpected Life Events, will cover the first initial steps of dealing with financial chaos and the potential mental health impacts that are often seen during chaotic and traumatic situations, and to offer possible directions to find support. Thanks everybody for joining. Do some brief introductions. So we've got Debbie Todd and Aubrey Bain from Dollars and Good Sense that are instructors and mentors in that organization. We have Charles Bartlett from Florida that is working on his master's in some mental health areas, addiction areas, different things like that, and is perfect for this chaos and traumatic discussion. And then we have Richard and Derek, who are from Seedling FinLit, that are also going to bring their expertise. So welcome, panel. Thank you very much for joining us. I'll start with the first question is, we're talking about the hurricanes, and we're really concerned about getting people help right out of the gate. And I know that when I've had not that major of a traumatic experience in my life, your brain tends to get a little bit discombobulated. Big word there. But you get tired because you're not eating right, you don't sleep well, and then simple things become hard to figure out what the next step is. So let's start out. What is the next step? So I just went through a hurricane. How do I get help? How do I help my family? What are the things I need to be thinking about right out of the gate?
Well, I definitely think the first things are the human sustaining pieces that we all need, which is food, shelter, clothing, things of that nature, and finding those, resources in order to gain all of those things and to feel more secure in everyday life and getting through that and getting through those first steps.
That's great,
I'll
Richard. That
just
leads me to think, and Derek, I'll let you jump in right on that. Also, what if I didn't save for this? What if I didn't pre-plan for this? So what do I do next?
I just want to add before we dive into that to what Richard said. It goes back to even as a veteran educator, we would always talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That you do have to have those basic needs met first before you can even have any discussion about anything else. So being a former Hurricane Katrina victim and being from Louisiana, we always deal with hurricanes all the time, and knowing that we lose power, there's floods and all of these different things. It's just so important to just make sure that you have food, water, shelter, clothing, and you check on your loved ones to make sure that everyone is okay. And then we can start to think about everything else. So that should be front of mind. Anyone listening to this, so just make sure that you're reaching out to those resources that are available and to family members and checking in on them.
I think that also goes towards those resources, getting those things, taken care of first has a huge impact on your mental well-being, because if you don't have food and you don't have shelter and you don't have those things, that is going to impact, your mental faculties so much more than, being able to have those things and think clearly about the next steps and what to do. And, we're always a lot of times in trauma, and Charlie, I think you could probably speak more to this, but when it happens, we're thinking, oh no, we're trying to think three steps ahead instead of just that first initial step, to take and to regulate ourselves.
Yeah, physical safety is definitely gonna be the most important thing. If a home's damaged or you don't have shelter or you can't get food. I know, like, obviously, Florida has a crisis services that do provide support. So anyone in that situation definitely has some lifelines. terms of getting food, in terms of getting shelter. If it's regarding just psychology, the main thing is to, try to calm things down, because the problem is when we get too emotional, we can get impulsive. And whether that leads to making bad decisions financially or in response to the crisis that has ensued, one of the most important things is to try to, not come from an emotional brain, slow it down. And that can either be like grounding techniques that get you more in the present, mindfulness can be effective, journaling. But it's really important when you're trying to find effective solutions, in terms of what you need to do for your family, in terms of financial considerations, that you can get into more of that logical mind and not come from emotion as much. And there you can kind of start to see what solutions will be most effective instead of doing impulsive actions that could be counterproductive.
Jump in with what Charlie was saying because he was so um, spot on. And I guess maybe Charlie, I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of not only a finance person, but as a mom. I mean, this when families or communities go through these kinds of sudden natural crises and these disasters that happen, we do get emotional. That's kind of natural, right? It's that fight or flight that we end up with. And so you were spot on when you were talking about grounding and slowing down and taking a breath and all of that. And Aubrey, you can chime in here with me if you want to as a fellow mom, but it's hard for us. I mean, I'm thinking about it from the woman and mom perspective is that, we go into that mode because we want to protect our babies. And sometimes it's hard for us to sit there and go, okay, what do I need to do? Because we go into this, mama bear, we're going to protect everything. And we just want to make sure this stuff happens. And I think it's hard in that when there's lack of communication, typically, lack of power, lack of cell service, lack of ability to communicate with each other, you feel isolated and you're afraid. And that's a difficult combination to try to re-regulate. But I think that if we can talk about this and say what resources are there and can we provide those resources to the folks that are listening to us, that would be so helpful for us to be able to do it because that's really where they are. I mean, is they calm that down when they feel like they've got something they can look at or do or resources they can find. It will help them re-regulate. And when we're worried about our family members, it makes it even more important that we try to get to those resources as quickly and as effectively as possible. So, and I know that Larry has prepared quite a few things that he can show us that is going to be able to help the folks that we're trying to help so they can know where to go get those practical resources. And then, Charlie, I think you're going to be able to come back and tell us a lot about what you think is going to happen as far as how that helps them re-regulate and to feel more confident. And then, Aubrey, what do you think about, I mean, being a mom, you've been through tornadoes, so with babies, right?
The biggest thing the hurricane brought, the storm, is uncertainty.
Right.
And how do we deal with uncertainty? We
Right.
panic.
Yeah.
We don't really do well with things we can't make sense of, where we can't see clarity on where this is leading, what consequences it's going to create for us, what the solutions are. And so then that can create that flight or fight response where we're like, what's our safety? Are we in danger? Especially in the middle of it, is my house going to get blown over? I know that the news, as much as it's informing us, it can dramatize the events. So I know some people really felt that their house is going to get knocked over. So yeah, and that uncertainty can create a lot of panic, which does get us in the limbic system, does get us in that emotional mind, and then that can lead to those impulsive decisions. But the two most important things in terms of mental, like psychology, is to try to calm yourself down, and even though there's uncertainty, and be solution focused rather than reactionary. And that's where knowing what's available to you can create more certainty to say, okay, there's resources that the local government's providing. Here are financial vehicles that can help me solve the issues that might be there. So that's where it's important to first get out of that emotional mind into the more rational mind through mindfulness or grounding techniques, and then to see what solutions exist and come from that framework, and that will lead to the most effective response to whatever the consequences of an uncertain event are.
I agree with all. I would say if it were me, and I'm of course looking completely from the outside, I've never been through anything quite like this. So I feel for everybody going through this because I cannot imagine. But I think in that same vein, just choosing to take things one day at a time, because you really won't know how it will turn out. You don't have any control over it either. So choosing, I'm going to take this one day at a time. And then I know Mr. Rogers always said, look for the helpers. And I've been really encouraged to see just on my, own Instagram feed and whoever I was happening to already be following at that time who was in that area. There's a lot of people getting together resources just on the ground to help, just even private citizens or private businesses. I've been seeing some of the pregnancy centers are just getting like boxes. I was watching someone unload like an entire Amazon truck worth of stuff for pregnant moms and vulnerable moms. HSLDA, which is probably the biggest homeschool organization in the country, they have an entire fund set aside for homeschooling families who need to recover from this and need supplies replaced and things like that. So if you're part of certain subgroups, like there are funds or people that are getting funds together and resources together for, vulnerable people groups or different people groups set aside for certain types. So maybe mull over and consider, what groups would I belong to? Again, pregnant moms, homeschooling, those are the ones that I'm looking at on social media, but everybody's going to have their own little bubble that they fit into. And there are lots of people looking to help and getting funds together. So be encouraged on that front. I know there's a lot of people, mobilizing right now to get everything ready for, to help people get back up on their feet. So.
Yeah, I want to touch on a few of our points. One thing she said was take it one day at a time. And I think that's very important. And to add on to that, for the kids, try to make it as normal as possible. Follow that set schedule. They really need that structure because there's a lot of chaos going on. And as the parent, you're fearful. You might not know what's going to happen the next day. So you mentally need to take it one day at a time. And then for your kids, try to set up a schedule that they can follow that's as close to their normal routines. And that's going to keep them grounded and looking forward to what's next because they're going to find comfort in that structure. And so I think that's very important. So definitely keep that in mind. And then also as a parent, yes, it's bad that you're going through this bad situation, but your kids are watching you. They're watching to see how you're reacting. And yes, it's a bad situation right now, but as you're looking towards the future, how you handle this situation and your strength and even the areas where you're weak, being able to speak to those things to let them know how you're managing and they are going to model how you handle these things. So I know it's a tough situation, but this is an opportunity to be able to put something into your kids so that whenever they're dealing with something similar in the future, they're watching how mom and dad handle these situations and then they can learn from this and continue to grow and hopefully manage it better because they were able to learn from you and throughout this experience.
Also, as an educator as well and a father, I would definitely say, I know it feels sometimes, even not during a crisis, but it feels sometimes that our kids absolutely need to have a screen or need to have something. Throughout human history, children have not had screens, and they can adapt and they can find new ways, to play with each other and do those things. And a screen, maybe they might forget about it after a day or two that they even had the screen, and it might detox a little bit, but they're resilient and they are amazing at that, and their creativity and everything. And Charlie, you could probably speak a little bit more to the child psychology of that, of where kids go during those situations with the brain. But they're resilient, and like I said, being a dad, they can handle it without a screen.
Richard, I really appreciate you bringing in such a dynamic impact in how children think about things. And one thought that crossed my mind is that in these disasters and in these crises, as parents, sometimes we feel like we have to just be strong and we have to become the superhuman and we have to not ever admit anything is chaotic or that we're afraid of anything. And I would encourage the families that are looking to find normalcy and to get kind of their feet back under them, that one of the great gifts that you can give your children is simple, open honesty and saying that it's okay to be afraid and it's okay to not know what's going on, and encourage them to, in a gentle way, to be able to share their feelings, because bottling it up can show up later in life as other unhealthy coping mechanisms. So sometimes it's okay to just sit back and as a parent, just say, hey, you know what? I'm scared. This was tough. And share with them what we're feeling. But guess what? We're okay. And we're going to get through this. And this is going to be an adventure for us. And I'm not trying to say, turn it into a game or anything, but have it be an adventure and bring them in as part of it, and let them feel like they can say that I'm scared and I don't know what's going on. B, I don't know what's going to happen next and what can we do? And encourage them to feel like they're part of the process and allow them to vocalize what they're feeling and express it. That's just what the thought that came across my mind.
Yeah, it's actually a really good thought. Because kids don't have as much life experience, so they don't have as much in terms of context. So whereas an adult that may have been through a hurricane or, it kind of understands the context behind it. A kid, might seem like the end of the world. So first creating an environment where they can express their feelings. I mean, that's essential to any household. Kind of going through psychology, and what I'm learning is, it's really important for parents to give kids a comfortable atmosphere where they can express their emotions. The main thing is emphasizing you can always express and feel your emotions, but trying to regulate behavior. Like it's okay to be angry, but not to throw your toy. Always ensuring you're validating the emotion, and if the behavior is not what you want it to be, maybe addressing that, but always making kids feel like they can share what they're going through emotionally, and that enables them through uncertain events or what happened in Florida with the hurricane, to be able to communicate with their parents, and for the parents then to be able to provide them the guidance and mentorship that's needed, to navigate such a tough time, especially if the kid's never been through something like that. So having that communication and knowing how it's impacting your kid is extremely important in events like this, and that can only really come through the kids feeling they have a environment where they are able to express themselves emotionally.
That's all great content. I'll throw in a little bit from my side. Uh, so first off, what that brought me to is, there's some people out there that just get in those situations and then they turn into the fixer, right? I got to fix it. So they're not fully focused on what their kids are doing. They're trying to solve the next problem or that current problem that we're working on. So my advice there is you're not going to change your personality over this. In fact, some of your flaws are probably going to accentuate themselves during this time, but be aware of that. And take a break and take some breaths and get your mind and listen to your family, whether it's your wife or your kids. You don't always have to say something. You can be still and listen and pay attention and give them the eye contact that they need. Even if you're in your mind thinking, I'm working on it, I'm working on it, quit throwing all this on me. You can sit back and take that step. The other thing is lean outside of your family. It is important that you lean on your family. But as Aubrey pointed out, different people are sending stuff down, stuff like that. Also, the government, and I say this because I've been out, I'm on an incident management team, and there's some people that just don't want the government involved in anything. I get that. But the government is really good at one thing on these crises, whether it be fire, floods, hurricanes, they send in counselors. So if you need some place to talk to, find an incident management team. Find out, because they're going to bring in public information officers. So that goes to what Charles said about the news is doom and gloom, this, that, and the other. One of the things that's really good about the government public information officers is they are working with all of the communities that they're in at that time to find out what's going on. So the information that they release is good information and it's not hearsay. They won't release it unless it's there and going to happen. They also bring in HR people, lots of guidance counselors, lots of stuff like that, so that they can walk you through. So if you're a tough person like me, that I don't want my wife to see me cry and know that I'm flustered, I can go over there. I can talk to an HR person over there or I can go to my pastor or something like that and find somebody that I can talk to so that I'm not weighing that stress that I have, that I like to carry for the family into the family, because that's not being positive going forward. And I like what Debbie Todd said about it's not a game, but you got to listen to your kids. You got to let them be able to express and not bottle up. And if you're a bottling kind of person that builds walls, and I know a few people like that, you got to let them open up. And so that's somewhere where you can check yourself in that instant crisis. I did hear something else that came up that's interesting is, okay, I got no power, I got no house, blah, blah, blah. You guys are talking about there's these services out there. My computer got soaked. My phone's dead, much less my kids, and my kids are resilient. I heard that. What do I do? Where do I start to go finding this stuff besides sitting in my house, just dreading the next step? What are some things that I can do in my community that maybe will help me find some of this stuff to get started? Like going to your public library, going to the airport and the front lobby area check-in where they got plugs there. Some of those services that people don't think about, right? I'm not flying out anywhere, but wait a minute, I got a hurricane and they're in the airport's not flying, but they got power. So a library might have a computer in it that you can go to and look things up. So you're not dead in the water unless the whole area could be out. Then you've got that issue. And then I'll show some ways to find some resources after this conversation.
Most large telecommunication companies, that was my industry before I went into education. Most large telecommunication companies, Verizon and T-Mobile, they will have trucks down there that have the satellite service, that have everything, have chargers. It almost looks like an RV park. They have those teams absolutely ready to go at a moment's notice, and especially since they knew this was coming, I can guarantee those are there also for support. So getting a connection, if that's a problem, those are there, and those are on their websites as well to find.
I also probably wouldn't hesitate to find a church, because I have a feeling the churches are not only taking people in, but also potentially connected to other services and could direct people to the next step. That would be the first place I would go. Also, school districts. They are, absolute shelters, for all of that. So the largest high school is probably designated as the community shelter, where they'll have the generators, they'll be given power, initially, they'll be given power priority, things of that nature to house a lot of people or to have a lot of people coming through. And that's where a lot of these community resources might be located at first, to find them and then know where to go. So, or information officers like Larry was talking about before. So because they're community centers, like I said, libraries, schools, churches, all of these places that are community congregation areas, I think are great places to start.
Yeah, and I also think we're going to get in the areas that have been hit. Most of the community civic leaders are mobilizing, and as Aubrey said, they're bringing in local folks who can actually help things happen. I'm thinking about your Chamber of Commerce, your Kiwanis, your Lions Club, your Rotary groups. They are connected not only from the business aspect within the community, but also within the other groups that are out there to help, such as the Red Cross and Samaritan's Purse. And most of the larger local churches are just pouring tons and tons and tons of outreach funds into this. So there is just a vast array of resources that are becoming available. Most of the larger retailers are actually, believe it or not, they are diverting from areas that are not hit by the disasters, several staples that are available. I just went to Sam's Club, and they were talking about how 75% of the toilet tissue and paper towels and plates and things like that are actually being diverted to the hurricane areas, so that way they can make sure people have the necessities and are able to eat and able to do some of those basic things that they want to do. So there are just a plethora of resources that are available. And I know, Larry, you've done a great job of kind of showing what that'll look like on an on-screen, over-the-shoulder look. So, at what point you want to show that, I think that would be really, really helpful for the people that are listening to this, so they can actually say, this is practically where you go and make those things happen. So would you care to do that now?
Yeah, I'll do that in just a second. So,
Okay.
other places to go, because before they can see what I'm doing, they're going to have to be able to get connected to something to get there,
Right.
whether it's a phone system or something like that.
Mhm.
Another thing to think about though is your fire stations,
Yeah.
your police stations.
Mhm.
They have resources. A lot of times, being on an incident management team, Richard mentioned the schools. We often shelter up in schools for our incident management support staffs. And the reason we do that is because a lot of schools have a cafeteria in it, so we can cook food there for people. They've got power throughout the building, usually, or a generator, so that we can set up extension cords and power strips where people can plug in and sit and talk to the community and sit there while their stuff's working or they're working on stuff. You talked about that they may have telecommunications stuff. So Verizon, AT&T, I know T-Mobile, they have these things called cows that they bring out, which are basically an electronic thing with Starlink and stuff like that. So there's resources out there for people to use. But you got to just kind of start looking around. And I think what we're saying is don't limit your resources when you need help. There's people out there. And the last thing I'll say about that, being on an incident management team, I know that the country right now, going to what Aubrey said about pulling resources from different locations, is that I was on a wildfire in Oregon when the hurricanes came through and started, and we gave up resources to send them to the east, sleeping units so people could sleep in dry beds. We gave up our kitchen and started using a local caterer instead of our Mobile One kitchen so it could roll to the southeast. So a lot of resources rolled that direction. You just have to be able to find them. So with that, I'm going to show a little bit of how you guys can go, how people could go find things at different locations. And we'll start out on the FEMA site. And so on the FEMA site, first of all, can everybody see the FEMA site? Okay. So on the FEMA site, most of it talks about applying now for grants and aids and stuff. And as we've talked about, yeah, that's something you need to do, but that's probably not the first things that you're looking for, right? You're looking for food, you're looking for shelter, you're looking for water, some things like that. So if you go on the FEMA site and start in under disasters and assistance, they've got a lot of things about the storms and where to go apply for your flood insurance and where to go to apply for this, that, and the other. That's all really needed. But if you start out with disaster related FAQ document, down in this document, they will talk about how do you get debris removed from your house so maybe you move in? What do you do about unemployment assistance? So again, they're starting with these different assistance things, how to volunteer, but down towards the middle, uh, where can I go find what's going on in my neighborhood? So uh, when you go to that FAQ page, they have different categories. So we talked about, food. I need food. I need shelter. So they have different categories that you can go look at to look for help in those areas. So some of them are about getting assistance, but there's other things for your basic needs. I need childcare. I am still having to go into the hospital because I'm a critical worker and I need childcare, but I have no home. Where do I find childcare? What do I do? Flood insurance is stuff, but food. So let's just look at the food section and see what's out there. So is my tap water safe to drink? They ask about that. What are different water sources? If I'm running out of water sources, do I need to get documentation for my home repair? What happens if my well gets contaminated? But where can I get safe food and water is a big topic that they have there. So if
This
I
is
go out to
very
DRC
helpful.
locator, this actually lets me put in an address. So I've got this map here, and I'll try to scroll up for the map a little bit. But I can move the map around. And then if I go in and I say, let's look in, I happen to be in North Carolina, which is where the hurricane hit, right? And then I'll do Florida. And it zooms me in and it shows me all these places that I have different things. And when you scroll over them, it tells me what the address is for that location. And I can zoom in on that. So I can look at what part of the state I'm in. And I can go down and find out what they're doing there. So this is a recovery center. It's at the Hogan Community Center, and it gives you what time they're open. So that's a place that you can start. We'll go back up, and I can look at Florida. And we know that there are some areas in Florida that got hit really hard. So if I zoom out on Florida a little bit, I'll zoom back in. Sorry about the map mess. So if we go to Central Florida, for example, there's a place in Bartow. Well, what's in Bartow? I can go down and scroll down, and number one is the Stewart Center. Is in Bartow. It gives you the address, tells you what they're doing. It says available services. There's some general information there. So that means they got PIOs. They've got some people where you can apply for your small business loans. But we've also known from the reason we got here was because they have food and water there.
Yep.
So if you need food, water, shelter, there's some other places. So you can scroll down and find stuff in an area that's close to you and try to go get some help and get some resources so that you can do different things in your recovery path and get the help that you need right out of the gate. Of course, FEMA is also good for applying for all the aid and things like that. But this gets through some of that stuff we just talked about is I can go find a center that's close to me, click on the number, it moves me down there. And this is in Punta Gorda, Florida. And they're doing general information, hazard mitigation. Again, they're doing small business loans. They've got food, water, and shelter there. And that's at the regional park. So there's several options that you can look at on the FEMA site if you know kind of how to get there. It's a little bit hidden, but like we did, you go to the FAQ off of disaster assistance. I'll do it one more time. So you're going to go to the Disaster Recovery Center, which is the disaster assistance on the main menu. Go over to the FAQ on the drop down, and then go to your filters, and you select your filter and look for food, shelter, childcare, whatever you need. And then that will get you to this page.
Good deal. And Larry, that was so well done and so practical for people. And the other thing that we can also share is that in addition to the FEMA sites, that's where a lot of the other agencies that are pouring help in are going to be based out of. So they're going to be able to help direct you to some of these other areas that are going to be able to provide you with additional resources, such as childcare, or what do you need to do? And there's going to be some technical help that people are going to need. Hey, how do you do the unemployment? How do I start to fill out my application? So not just I have to do this, but they will have help there that will help you get through the application. So that's something I think that would be a big fear to people, that they're not used to these big government lines. They're not used to government rules and regulations in the forms, but there are people there that are qualified and are willing to help you make that as easy as possible.
So Deb, it's that interesting that you said that. So even on the FEMA page, they have other links to other pages. So here's the 211.org. There's food banks you can go look at to help get you food. I went ahead and looked at the 211.org, right? There's mental health help that you can get. There's what's going on in your local 211. There's also links out there, and I'm not going to go through them all at this time, but there's links to the Red Cross, and the Red Cross lists where they're at off the FEMA site. So you can go there. Salvation Army, the Feed America is down in Florida right now. So lots of different options. You can get there through FEMA, but there's other ways that you can get there as well.
One small thing that I just considered, I don't know if I'm the only one that has this. This probably isn't necessarily the best thing, but also maybe a realistic thing. I don't know, some of these applications and things might require certain documentation that you may not have any longer. But I bet you a lot of people have digital records of those things hidden in their emails, in their sent emails, in their photos maybe, which again, probably not the best idea to have those, but realistically, the doctor asked for a picture of your kid's birth certificate, so you snapped it and sent it. So you might consider, if there's any chance you have a record of that somewhere, you might dig through your wherever you back stuff up. So your again, your emails or flash drives or in your old documents somewhere, if you have those backed up to a cloud, you can access your iCloud backups from a regular computer. So you don't have your phone, but you can access your backups elsewhere. So I think I could probably collect, a bunch of what we needed, just, from different places. I wouldn't have everything. And I have since gone through and eliminated some of those things because I don't want them out on the web somewhere. But these devices automatically back up anything you take a picture of, and they back them up pretty fast. So you might happen to have some of the documents that you don't think that you have online. If you can kind of consider, I said flash drives, you probably don't have your flash drives, but anything that would back up, you might consider, or like, in your Gmail or in your Yahoo or whatever. Anyway, just a thought that I had when we were talking about applying for things, and obviously documentation is going to be a problem.
Just a few closing thoughts, just kind of bring back a lot of the stuff we've talked about, is to understand that this is an unusual circumstance. People have suffered a traumatic event, but for them to realize that they are alive, they're there, they have their family, and just to take the basics, get the basics, the resources that have been shown here will get a lot of that put back into place, and to remember to talk and communicate to keep the emotions from getting bottled up and causing issues. That would be the things I would be thinking about, and that there's a lot of help out there, and there are people that are willing to help you. Just go ask.
And I think a big thing too is to set realistic goals, especially if the storm or hurricane create a lot of consequences. The worst thing you can do is fixate on how things were prior to the crisis and feel helpless or hopeless and where you are now. So it's really important to set realistic goals and just try to do the best you can moving forwards. Loss is tough, whether it's loss of a house, property, a job, or just anything. But yeah, it's just so important to say, like, how can I improve my circumstance the best moving forward? What are realistic goals and solutions that can get me there? And just trying to do the best you can. That adjustment, adjustment's really tough, but the worst thing you can do is feel hopeless that you can't get things back to where they were before. So yeah, definitely make sure to set realistic goals, to creating a solution moving forward.
I would also suggest communicating with anyone that you have any sort of credit with or that you borrowed from. So say your credit union, your bank, your mortgage company, just letting them know, especially if if you use a local credit union, then they know that obviously you're in a bad spot. But if you're using Wells Fargo for your auto loan and they're out in who knows whereville, call them and say, hey, I'm in a crisis. Can we work something out? And sometimes the collections department can just plain work with you. I mean, I'm sure they have relief programs for these kinds of things. I don't know that for sure, but I bet you they do. If you're in a qualifying area, then there's going to be, different things. And of course, the condition of your vehicle, depending on who you are, is going to be in, you may have your vehicle, you may not, but I would communicate. I wouldn't just let the pressure just, carry that around and just worry about it until the due date comes. I would call today and say, hey, what can we do? And I bet you there are solutions for that. I mean, this isn't something you could control. So I would at least communicate with everybody that you owe something to, and let them know that you will be getting back up on your feet as soon as possible. But you're in a rough spot, so that they know. And so going forward, that they're understanding of the situation and can hopefully work something out for you.
Oh, man, I love that idea, because they also need to know where you are. Don't send mail to my home anymore. My home doesn't exist. It's not somewhere. The postman is not coming down my street, in a motorboat, to deliver mail. Those things are not going to, but I agree, letting them know. And yes, as far as I know, that yes, acts of God are actually included in all of those big lender programs, big lender houses and things of that nature. That, yeah, they 6 months they'll reconnect with you and do that. But for right now, or whatever the federal government has told them to put a hold on mortgages, things like that. I know that you had mentioned in those areas they know to stop. That's not going to happen right now. So with dealing with financial crisis, that one of the first things is don't worry about that. Like, that's something that is taken care of and is not going to be automatically taken from your account. Everything gets stopped, during something like this.
I'm sure that's a huge relief lifted off everyone's shoulders, because that would be my first thoughts. Oh my gosh, how am I going to pay my mortgage? But thankfully, that's all worked into the package, and everyone knows this has happened. So no one's surprised when you call and say, hey, I don't have a house anymore, So
And so, my final thoughts that I'll add in, lean on your faith, family, and friends. If all three of those apply to you, then great. But that's why you have those things in your life before the traumatic event that comes, because you have those relationships and those beliefs that you have put work into creating. And so lean on your family and your friends. Check on each other. Make sure that everyone's okay. And like I said, the 3 F's: faith, family, and friends.
Well, I would like to take just a second to thank all the panelists that joined today. I think you guys gave some great tips for starting out right away. We will follow this up. For those that listen to this podcast, we will have another one that comes out in probably 2 weeks from now. We will work on getting that put together and rolled out so that we do a series, as we promised at the kickoff. We'll do a series related to emergency and trauma outside of the normal thing, and then we'll start our normal podcast after that. So thank you, panel, for joining, and have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
To view the entire series, go to centralimpact.org.